I remember the last war. It was so long ago now, so much has happened between now and then, but I recall it in vivid detail. I've faced them before, how they come in their droves, burying you in their dead if need be. This time is different. This time I and my brothers know what must be done. We were dipped in the horror of the tyrannic wars, heated in its fires, tempered by its terrors. We were forged into weapons to meet this threat. I am ready. The onward rush is as expected. It seemed mindless, but we veterans know. We know how to deal with them. Our ammunition was almost stacked high next to us this time. Each squad carried a flamer, each sergeant a weapon of worth. But I am no longer the young Marine I was. I now stand with many a stud of service in my brow, many a mark, pennant and purity seal. In my hand I wield a weapon of not just worth, but of power. I field finis interlocutor, the end of horrors. I am a wielder of a sword of justice. The chaff come and die in their droves, but our overlapping fields of fire, our gun emplacements, our barrages, they cut them to ribbons. But again, as expected, a spearhead of larger beasts now thunders towards our lines, amongst the teeming tidal waves of the lesser. I walk from my elevated position, calmly, with pace, but with cold purpose. My honor guard takes my heels and follows as we descend to the gates. We are cheered by our men as we process, those behind the lines, those in elevated positions. A ripple of bellows of encouragement, as they know where we go and why. Calmly, we arrive and stand in an extended V position. I am at the head, of course. And as the door explodes into a hurricane of splinters, we do not flinch, we do not step back as they come. Huge, so alien, so deadly. Twice the height of a Marine, they barge their way in, some half dozen, all slowing each other almost in their rush, their thirst to destroy us. I raise finis interlocutor and lower it, and almost instantly half of their number are hit by lines of light that burn straight through them, torrents of melter that melt as they thrash in pain. But some get through. 3. One heads left of me, one right. My guard will stand. I take a pace forward to meet the Carnifex head-on, which we have learnt actually surprises them once or twice. Not this time, though. I flick the switch and my power sword is now alight with a blue aura of energy, worms of light crackling along its edge. I smile behind my helmet. I did not have her the last time I met one of these beasts. The captain stood as the Carnifex barreled towards him, but then took 2 paces at a dash and started his dissection of the towering form. Swift and measured, economical slices leapt from the captain. The Carnifex lost one of its forward, huge pincers, half of its maw, raising up to crush the captain, as it knew it was no match for his speed. For a mere instant, its soft underbelly was exposed. A mistake. In that instant, the captain hunched low, then sprang upwards with all of his might, his sword in both hands slicing the beast from midriff to throat, and then through its chin. The power sword had cut through so neatly, so deeply, that it near fell in half as its stomach opened and its contents spilt out. The captain landed and rolled back out of the way of the fallen carcass. When the dust settled, his vision took in a new terror, but the one he had hoped would appear. The Hive Tyrant. Its towering form, but unhooved legs, dipped to go under the entryway and looked down at him with sword arms wide, an unmistakable challenge. I accept. Story continues from the entry for power weapons. I am Gaius Sempronius, a captain of the Ultramarines, a true son of Ultramar, a true son of the Imperium. I hold in my hands a weapon of worth, Finis interlocutor, the end of horrors. I am a wielder of the sword of justice, a power sword of ancient providence. I stand before the gap in the path of a thing that Finis interlocutor was forged to slay, a horror. May the avenging sun himself, the regent, guide my hand, for it is huge. It is not the first time I have faced one such as this, a hive tyrant. It is the beating heart, the mind, of the horde of tyrannids that gnash and claw and charge our lines. But all of that is silenced now. I know my men, my brothers, will cover me, will allow me to deal with this duel uninterrupted. Their bolt of fire creating a cordon around us. But they do not seek to target the tyrant. He is for me, nor would it do any good if they did. I know. I am a veteran of the tyrannic wars. I know how to deal with these things. Granted, the last time I fought one, it was with a full squad at my side. But I have learned much, have endured much, have become hardened. I have trained at my craft with Cato Sicarius himself. It was an honor, and it was an education. Time to combine that training with my knowledge, my experience. Time to destroy the beast. It takes a few paces towards me on its hooved legs, its forearms raised high, all but one holding massive swords made of bone. Yet, as with everything with these things, the Tyranids, they are not to be underestimated. Some call them beasts, animals. I know this to be a lie. They are no beasts. At least not this one. He is their liege, their lord, and it is by his will, as an extension of the great devourer, that they are forced onto our lines. If I can best him, they would devolve into the animals they are called, but whilst he stands they are clever, they are controlled, and they are almost unstoppable. I must destroy it. Not only for this reason, but also because my men look on. I must be their sword this day. I must be as swift as their combined will. I must be their hand. And so it begins. It comes to me fast, so very fast. It is larger than I, stronger than I, faster than I, armed with 4 weapons to my 1. Nor will it rely purely on brute strength and speed alone. Once they did, in the first war. They were indeed little more than urges and teeth then, a hunger made manifest. But with each battle, with each war, they are learning. It will be as cunning as it is powerful. I must be aware. The initial flurries of its strikes are swift, but comparatively light in their impact. It is testing me for weakness. Usually my blade, Finis interlocutor, would shear anything it touches in half. Yet the huge bone swords strike down on it, and nary even a chink is taken from them. A pity, I had hoped, but such is destiny. I match its blows, I counter and feint, preventing direct contests of strength by angling my parries to deflect, not directly stop. Each contact still sends shockwaves down my arms. If I were not experienced, then any one of them would have torn the sword from a hand too tightly gripped. I give ground, and it follows me, constantly hacking at me. I give ground, and I give ground. But it is a choice. My men know this. They do not fear my seeming retreat. They know me. I am their lord. I am, if I can be blunt, their hero. It is proclaimed in the armor I wear, the rarity a sign of honor, the honor a sign of duties fulfilled beyond the scope of that which is normal, even for an Astartes, even for an Ultramarine. Almost there. My fortitude is legendary amongst even my brethren, but its is more. It knows that as the contest continues I will weaken, and it pushes on. The tyrant wishes me to make my stand in desperation, to forgo the advantage of movement that I have over it. Despite its speed, it is a large target after all. So I oblige it. I stand my ground for a moment, and even insinuate that I am about to drive at it, as my parries now include ripostes and attempts to strike it back. It thinks it senses desperation. As planned. Come, tyrant. I've been waiting for this moment for weeks. It hammers down on me, my parries increasing in their own force, slightly slower. I emulate fatigue. Here it comes. As predicted, the barbed tail slips from between its legs and lunges up as its lash comes down to wrap around my leg and pull them from under me. Not today, Xenos. I ducked the tail, and with all of my skill and the speed I persuaded it I no longer possessed, I cut through the lash heading towards me. It screams in frustration at my cut, and for a second its guard is down. I lunge forward, but not hard. I know what will happen. My blade, my holy power sword, streaks towards it, but is blocked by field of energy, psychic power. It is turned aside. In the instant I am off balance, it strikes down hard with two swords. I parry them and let them slide to the side of me, but its third blade comes crashing down into my left shoulder. It punches through my own field of power generated by the iron halo I wear, but some of its force is absorbed. It hits my power armor as intended and cuts through it deep, but not as deep as the tyrant thinks, for I wear no normal set of power armor. This is artificer armor, or I would never have allowed that third strike to hit. Blood trickles down my arm, and I let my left arm go loose. It is crippled, eh? The tyrant pushes its advantage, bullying me. With the strike I am weaker, yes. I fall back. I give more ground, and then more. I feign staggering backwards as it comes on like a juggernaut. Here. We have passed a building, a doorway to be precise. With all of its attention on me, the tyrant does not notice my librarian standing inside. We are now in his vision. His mind has been torn at, ripped at, filled with the chittering of the Tyranids, the shadow in the warp. It kills or drives many psychers insane. But he is an Ultramarine. He will do his duty. As we pass, his eyes flick open. Even from here, I can see the pain and concentration on his oh-so-familiar face. He is in agony. So he gives this agony form, gives it outlet. A blast of lightning crackles from his outstretched hand and slams into the back of the tyrant. The Tyranid's psychic shields protect it for an instant, and I see the lightning cascade around an orb of its protection. But as my librarian continues his assault, the shield cracks, just as his arm lowers and he falls silently forward onto the ground, exhausted. But he has given me my opening. I dive forward with full knowledge of what this will cost me. My blade is blocked many a time, but I manage to get one telling hit in. I cut into its leg, just above the hoof. It comes off and the Tyranid falls to one knee, almost instantly beginning to regenerate. But it does not scream or even stop. Its parries are as fast as clear, but I push forward nonetheless, as my sword strikes down with an exaggeratedly high arc, using all of my power in one strike while it is at my level. Its blades stop mine. We are so close. As it draws back its third sword to strike, my own sword holding its other two in position, I strike. My crippled arm flashes towards its face, but not as fast as it could, because I wanted to underestimate me as so many have underestimated it. As my fist moves forward, I can see it's more open. It lunges down and envelops my arm up to the elbow, before its jaws clamp down. Like the charge across my sword, its acidic maw juices coat its teeth and cut straight through. My arm is inside its mouth. I grimace and stagger back. It raises itself up for the kill, its swords elevated above its head thrown back in a howl of victory. It is then that I slump firstly against the doorway, then dive inside the building to which I have been retreating, the open door, displaying a speed, again, it had not predicted. I lost my hand, but I had a gift in it for the tyrant. The building is covered in acid and viscera from the tyrant as it explodes from the inside out. Let's be honest, I did not want that on my armor, if it didn't burn straight through it. I lean against the wall and recover. My arm already stops gushing blood due to the Mayastatis genetics. I hear the scream from the horde. They can feel their tyrant die. And then his influence is gone. They begin to flee from our guns instead of charging at us. I give the signal from my Vox, and the land speeders sweep across the plains to harry and hunt them to extinction. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant. and I wish to introduce you to the forces and factions of the Warhammer universe. And today, we will be approaching one of the most contentious factions in the Warhammer universe. Alas, this is not contentious due to the lore, but due to the way it is being generated and has been retrofitted, as some might say. For the Ultramarines have, in recent years, taken up the baton of being the poster boys of Warhammer 40k, from the Black Templars, and then before them, the Crimson Fists. Their blue armour can be seen on the cover of most starter sets, and on the vast majority of their website, because blue is an easy colour to paint and yields dashing results. I hope you agree, for even a basic painter, as it should be for anyone attempting to get into this glorious hobby. But because of this, they have become what some might consider a Mary Sue force, meaning they are written without error, which means some believe that they are without character. This can also cause some resentment and claims of poor writing. I feel it is more complicated than that, and perhaps I shall go into that more in the future. The force has so much profile, and so much written about them, even a short film, as well-intentioned as it was. But let's fade down on that one. Thus, I would like to protect something a bit different today. A middle pathway between the bombastic new approach and the force as I remember them, which I feel is actually more appealing, but then I would say that. So do forgive me, gentle listeners. This is mainly due to my time being taken up performing my alchemy and my little dances for your entertainment. I must throw myself on your mercy and state I have not been able to keep up with the reading required to do their entry true canonical justice, so I will not even try. I hope you will indulge me on this one instance, just for the fun of it. And to the older ghouls like me, who may be a gentle listener, I implore you, just give me this one chance to rekindle the affair we've all secretly had with them, but just ignored one simple fact. It's not their fault. If there was ever a sin in their portrayal, it was never the fault of Minas Calgar, Rubud Gilliman, Ultramar, or their fans, even Cato Sicarius. Fans old or new, or really old, we know who we are. For I want to show you the Ultramarines and the Ultramar that I see, the ones I love, the ones I hope you may love too. But I guarantee you, you will respect them. So let us begin as we always do. For the very basics of their origins, let us lean on existing wisdom. Here goes. To quote, the Ultramarines, the 13th Legion of the Emperor's Space Marines. The Legion was created towards the end of the Unification Wars, developed from a gene seed that was noted to be absent of mutation and with a high adaptability. The original recruits were drawn from the sub-equatorial Maglev clans of Pampokro, the warring families of the Saragon Enclave, the Mid-Afric Hive oligarchy, and the anthropophagic tribes of the Caucasus Wastes. As varied in culture and origin as these groups were, they all had one factor in common: their violent and often bitter resistance in later stages of unification, a resistance broken ultimately in each case, not by negotiated surrender, but by near annihilation. In some situations, few remaining save interned refugees and orphan populations left by the savage conflicts which had brought these people to heel. The Legion was created at such a late stage in the war that they have no recorded combat operations on Terra, instead being used for the first time during the later liberation of the solar system. During the early Great Crusade, the Legion became known as the Warborn, referring to their disparate Terran origins that were all nonetheless forged through war. They were one of the 3 Space Marine legions to take part in the first pacification of Luna, the Moon, the first pitched battle of the Great Crusade. Another major early campaign of the Legion was putting down the Osiris Rebellion. By year 833 Millennium 30, the strength of the Legion had risen to 33,000, but its morale and pride was harmed as a result of heavy losses during the said rebellion. Like the other Primarchs, Rubud Gilliman was taken as an infant by the powers of chaos, and removed to a far-flung world in an effort to prevent the coming age of the Imperium. The infant Gilliman's capsule fell to Earth on Macragge, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule they found a child surrounded by a glowing corona, an aura. He was taken back to Connaught, one of the 2 consuls who governed Macragge, who adopted the infant as his son and named him Reboot, which means Great One. Reboot was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By age 10, he had mastered every subject the wisest men of Macragge could teach him, and his insights into matters of history, philosophy, and science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talents were ever as a military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Illyrium, a mountainous region in the far north of Macragge, whose wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Reboot fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the wildmen, who never again threatened the more civilized parts of Macragge. However, on his return to the capital, Reboot found the city in chaos, as his father's co-consul, Galan, had attempted a coup. Galan led a fraction of Macragge's nobility who were used to enjoying their wealth and position at the expense of armies of slaves, and resented Connaught's legislation favouring the common man, among whom he was immensely popular. Approaching the city, Reboot and his soldiers saw it was in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Galan's men, while the consul house was under siege. Reboot left his men to restore order in the city, while he rushed to the consul house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. He had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Galan's employ, and with his dying breath told Reboot who was responsible. Reboot swiftly crushed the rebellion, and amid a wave of popular relief, assumed the title of sole consul of Macragge. He set about punishing the treachery and carrying out his father's vision. Galan and his co-conspirators were executed, and their lands and wealth were redistributed to the people. With superhuman energy, Reboot reorganized Macragge's entire social structure, creating a meritocracy where office and honors were given to the hard-working rather than the wealthy and the influential. Under his leadership, Macragge prospered as it had never before. End quote. At this juncture, I would like it known that I will be doing a separate video on the glory and splendor of the streets, the thoroughfares, the palaces and peoples of Ultramar. You see, the culture of Ultramar is based on classical Rome, and I equate Reboot Guilliman to a portrayal of Gaius Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. As a bit of a classics fan, I do not wish to rush this entry, so please know it is coming. Another dispensation to your Uncle Voldemort, so I can really spread my wings and gush at the appropriate time. I promise it will be an experience worth the wait, as I will throw all of my art at its description. An entry I am thoroughly looking forward to. Now, to crack on. To quote, "With the exception of the Lunar Worlds, no legion conquered as many worlds, or conquered worlds as fast, or left conquered worlds in such good state during the Great Crusade as the Ultramarines. Guilliman restored the legion's morale and prestige following difficulties in the Osiris Rebellion, and later took revenge on the Syrian Cybrids at the Battle of Eurydice Terminal, in which they were wiped out. Whenever Guilliman liberated a world, he would not move on until he had set up a self-sufficient defense system, and left advisors behind to create industry, set up trade routes with the rest of the Imperium, and form a government whose first concern would always be the well-being of the people. The success of the Ultramarines may be thanks to their diverse but stable gene seed. In them was found a mixture of aggression and restraint, discipline and determination, which rendered them supremely suited for joint task force operations and cross-theatre warfare. As Ultramar grew into a small stellar empire of its own, Guilliman created a supremely efficient military machine centered around Macragge that provided the Ultramarines with a steady and excessive flow of new recruits. Between this factor and the minimal casualties suffered as a result of Guilliman's tactical genius, the Ultramarines soon became the largest of all the Space Marine legions. At the time of the Horus Heresy, it is estimated that the Ultramarines Legion numbered around 250,000 Space Marines. End quote. One to watch. The 2 grizzled sergeants sat back and chortled. Lucius Cornelius had just been joined by Metellus Pius, who had been out here all morning. A flask of water passed between them. The day was hot, but entertaining. Gone live yet? No. That bad, eh? Oh yeah. For Sons of Ultramar, we got another dense cohort here. Metellus Pius leaned forward to get a better view. Lucius Cornelius joined him. As the two looked down on an arena littered with hobbling scouts, all peppered by non-lethal ammunition, slouching towards the entrance to be replaced by another squad. As usual for any trial, they stood at attention in single file, preparing for a test of speed or fortitude or skill, unarmed and unarmoured. They assumed it was one of fitness. But one amongst them watched the other squads retreat out of the door. Pius gave the same instructions. Squad 6, you will attempt to neutralize the sentry gun. If you are hit, you are an instant non-combatant. Your results will be timed. As the first scout was about to move, a voice called out, "Wait!" There was silence as all of the scouts but one froze. This one looked up at the sergeants for any sign, any movement that indicated he was to be disqualified. No buzzer. None came. Inside the observation booth, both sergeants grinned to each other. The caller stepped out of line to address his brothers. They turned to him, confused for an instant, as they, too, then looked for censure, but none came. And then they started to listen. Look, they said squad, no names. We are Squad 6. Julius, you sweep up the left flank with Curio and Sejanus. Marcus, Cassius, Claudius, you on the right side, the rest with me. We will all take position in cover. Here's how we'll coordinate. If we do this right, nobody gets tagged. He continued for a few more seconds, and then they all broke and moved as one. He's the one to watch, that one. Gaius Sempronius. In the challenge trial, he knocked me down. He beat you? No! I beat him within an inch of his life, but he did take me off my feet once. Let's put him in for squad leader. See how he handles it. No! We go live first. Give it a week. Then we make him squad leader. The two sergeants grinned at each other as they slowly nodded. To quote, upon its assimilation in the Greater Imperium during the Great Crusade, Ultramar became a state within a state, enjoying a large degree of autonomy that continues to this day. While all within Ultramar are subject to the Emperor, the supreme leader of Ultramar was always Reboot Guilliman. After his wounding by Fulgrim, his leadership of Ultramar fell to the Lord of Macragge, with the Regent of Ultramar as his deputy. When Ultramar was a large realm of 500 worlds, there were tetrarchs that operated below Reboot Guilliman from 4 key worlds. After the heresy and the vast decrease of Ultramars in size, the post of tetrarch was abolished, but recently has been reinstated by the reborn Reboot Guilliman. We'll get to that in a moment. Below tetrarchs were imperial commanders, with connections to the Ultramarines. Each word of Ultramar is filled by feudal lords, loyal to the chapter master of the Ultramarines, which is why he is also known as Lord of Macragge, with all of the rights and responsibilities the title entails. End quote. And here is the crux of my vision. I remember them wrong. It may be my funny way of looking at them, or it may be what I really think is their soul. I'm sure we can politely discuss in the comments, but as I'm beginning to enjoy more and more, let us show, not tell. Interchapter Relations 101. The young Marines walked into the auditorium and took their position at their desks, all facing the lectern on its slightly elevated stage. Almost immediately, a sergeant walked in and flicked on a large display, beginning the lecture as soon as he passed the door. Images began to flash up of different Marines, their heraldic emblems, their honours, footage of them in combat. The images flashed quickly, but the young Ultramarines were like sponges, absorbing intense amounts of information even without the usual psycho-indoctrination. Let us begin. You will often be called upon to work alongside or even against our cousins in the other chapters. You must know of them, but also how we should best deal with them in all ways. But we can only do this from a place of understanding, for we are the sons of Reboot Guilliman. Something that is often said, but right here and right now you will finally know what that means. What that truly means. The screen continued to flash up images and footage, showing the other chapters of different Gene Fathers mostly now. You will never outshoot an Imperial Fist, or any son of Rogel Dawn. You will never win a duel with a Space Wolf, or any son of Leman Russ. You will never outmaneuver a White Scar, or any son of the Great Khan. You will never surprise a Raven Guard, or any son of Corvus Corax. You will never endure more than an Iron Hand, or any son of Ferrus Manus. You will never match the rage of a Blood Angel, or any son of Sanguinius. You will never be as strong or as stubborn as a Salamander, or any son of Vulcan. You will never win on a chaotic battlefield against a Dark Angel, or any son of Lionel Johnson. If you are ever to meet them on the field of battle, you must compromise yourself to these realities to have any hope of victory. Know your opponents as much as you know thyself, as is writ. Remember your most basic training, Sun Tzu, Principia Bellicosa, then above all, the Codex, and you will have a chance. It is always hoped that it is never necessary, but dark times are afoot, and we, as Ultramarines, must always be ready for every eventuality. But to know this is to lead into our second far more important reason. How we deal with the Greater Brotherhood, how we interact with them. In any negotiation, one side must make the opening bid. If common ground is to be found and common cause made, how can we expect to gain respect from our brothers if we give none first? So we give first. Always remember their strengths and acknowledge them. If you remember the lessons of the blocks, then it becomes clear. One block can be broken, many are strong. Thus it is with ourselves and our brethren. The sergeant was enjoying this, dragging it out as usual, seeing his charges shift slightly on tenterhooks. I can see the consternation. How could he say thus, when there are amongst our ranks the likes of Cato Sicarius, Marneus Calgar, and the other heroes, the other icons of the chapter of Ultramar? The hard truth is, they are the exceptions that actually prove the rule. There is more to it than that, of course. We are all Space Marines, but if the other Marines have slight advantages over others, then what is ours? What makes the Ultramarines who we are? And why are we so noted in the annals? Our banners so heaving with victory after victory, having stopped and annihilated a hive fleet of Tyranids, having fended off attacks from demon Primarchs and legions of chaos, having defended the furthest reaches of the Imperium from nigh on 10,000 years or more, being the most numerous of all gene seed stock and comprising over 2/3 of present Space Marines. What makes us special? As the sergeant spoke, the thousands of heraldic sigils of the chapters flashed up as one, then began to shift, and slowly to form a symbol. We are the sons of Rabud Gilliman. We are the glue. Of all of the legions created by the Emperor of Mankind, we are the most organized, the most diplomatic, and most able to do what the others cannot. We make the Imperium work. We bring any of the other chapters we meet into the Greater Brotherhood, into one army, one force. We respect them, but none can do what we can either. Not as easily, not as well. As the sons of Rogel Dawn build fortifications, we build bridges of our own. Accords. Between people, wings of the Militarum, and all of the Imperium. When we join an effort, it is far more likely to succeed. We are angels of death, just so, just as our brothers, but our slight advantage is not so slight. Now the larger image was clearer. The chapters have formed into one huge Aquila on the screen. One. For we show our brothers and all of the forces of the Imperium how we can work together, and when necessary, how it is done. We are one army, one force, one brotherhood. Start with that in your heart and your mind, and you will never fail. Conquer the hearts of your brothers, and then you can engage their minds and release their power. But we direct, we coordinate, we fight alongside our brothers. We show the way. We are all Space Marines, Astartes and Primaris, Ultramarine and the larger Brotherhood. Equals. When we are called to gather in a greater fraternity, the result is usually the whole being much, much greater than the sum of its parts. But by a tiny fraction, they are more able to win battles. But because we are more prepared, more organized, more disciplined, more supplied, more numerous, more considered in our acceptance of losses, we are more able to win wars. So when dealing with our brothers of other chapters and other Gene Fathers, never command, never order. Lead by example. Lead. Class dismissed. To quote, after the Horus heresy, Reboot Guilliman set himself to create the Codex Astartes, which would define the tactics and organization of all Space Marines, from battlefield strategies to squad markings. Most important of these changes was the division of the legions into 1,000-strong chapters. One of the chapters would retain the heraldry of the original legion, but the others would be given a new name and symbol. In doing so, Guilliman hoped to divide the power of the Space Marines to ensure that a civil war on the scale of the Horus heresy could never occur again. This, however, caused dissension amongst the remaining Primarchs. Rogul Dawn, Vulcan, and Leman Russ opposed the splitting of their legions, while Guilliman himself was supported by Yagatai Khan and Corvus Corax. Neither side was willing to relent, and the controversy grew more intense, with Rogul Dawn calling Guilliman a coward for not having participated in the Siege of Terra, and Guilliman accusing Dawn of being a rebel for refusing to follow the Codex. The situation threatened to bring the Imperium into another civil war. When the Imperial Fifth strike cruiser Terrible Angel was fired upon by the Imperial Navy, Dawn finally relented and agreed to split his legion. On Escrador, Alfarius, the Alpha Legion's Primarch, was apparently taken by surprise when Guilliman departed from his own strictures and led a surprise assault by his elite units on the Alpha Legion's headquarters. Of course, it could be Omegon, but please see the Alpha Legion entry for that. To quote, in the resulting personal combat between Alfarius and Guilliman, it is believed that Alfarius was killed. The Alpha Legion responded not by breaking and fleeing as Guilliman expected, but by turning on the Ultramarine detachment and harrying them so mercilessly that by the time they had returned to the main body of the Ultramarine force, their casualties were almost total. The Ultramarines were driven from the planet in the subsequent battle. Shortly after the heresy, the Imperial Fist laid siege to the Iron Warrior's greatest structure, the Eternal Fortress. The fortress consisted of 20 square miles of bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, razor wire tank traps, redoubts, and a system of complex underground tunnels in the shape of an 8-pointed star. At the center was a massive bunker intended to serve as a decoy and of no value whatsoever. Guilliman advised his brother Dawn against the siege, but Dawn was embittered at having lost the debate over the Codex of Guilliman and wished to vent his anger and frustration on his most bitter of rivals. Hundreds of Imperial fists littered the grounds of the fortress before Guilliman and the Ultramarines relief force arrived 3 weeks and 6 days later. The Imperial fists had fought without sleep and had long run out of ammunition before the Ultramarines found them. Perturabo, unable to hold against the 2 legions, made his final ploy, stopping the Imperial fists to recover over 400 of their dead and the gene seed they contained. Perturabo's victory was spoiled because of the intervention of the Ultramarines. However, his sacrifice was great enough for him to be raised to Demon Prince status. Ultimately, Guilliman's rule over the Imperium would come to an end in the Battle of Thessala. There he faced his treacherous brother Fulgrim, and in a fateful duel, Guilliman was mortally wounded during the battle and put into stasis thereafter by the Ultramarines, where he would remain for the next 10,000 years. End quote. And so the Imperium was devoid of the Emperor and his Primarchs, and slouched on for millennia. But in the year 999 of Millennium 41, in an event that I will describe in more detail as time goes on, Reboot Guilliman was resurrected. Although it is far more complicated than that, the upshot was that he had returned. The first of the Royal Primarchs to do so, he awoke to a time and Imperium he barely recognized. Amongst a tumult so roarous that his immediate action was required. He then, with many a travail and many a trap and escape, made his way to Holy Terra to take control of the Imperium and become the regent. So much more is there to tell of this, of his later actions, the Indomitus Crusade and the Primaris. Some we shall deal with in the future, some Games Workshop will develop in their new run of books about that era and the Primarch Reboot himself. But let us return to the Ultramarines, and my conclusion to this incredibly brief introduction to such an expansive and rich lore, even if it is from my own personal view only. The numbers and the why, a truth to be honoured by all parties. For the Ultramarines are indeed the most numerous of all seed. But there are reasons for this. The first is their gene seed is uncommonly stable. It has shown far less deviation and is less prone to mutation or degeneration than any other. Thus the Administratum and Ministorum have shown a preference for this seed in the creation of new chapters and foundings. For the genesis of a new chapter of Marines is no small feat of logistics and resources. Failed chapters are wasteful at the least, dangerous at the worst. But it is more than this. It stems back to the time of the Horus Heresy and the subsequent campaign, known as the Scouring, as we have just heard. I have explained before how Horus Lupercal, the master and the general of all of the armies of the Emperor, turned on his father and the Imperium, how this was called the Horus Heresy, and it almost destroyed humanity, but tore the Imperium in half and then burned most of it. So much was lost. Even so, Horus was slain by the Emperor in the final battle above Terra, and the traitors scattered in full retreat. After this was the campaign called the Scouring, in which most of the remaining legions fought the traitors time and time again, hunting them down to destroy them with such vigour and rage that they were nearly all pushed into the Eye of Terror. During all of this, the Ultramarines were left as the only legion to defend the rest of the Imperium entire. Reboot had to recognise and restructure what remained of the Imperium, to salvage all he could. He and the Ultramarines made sure that there was something left for the other legions to return to when they had finished their campaign, and they did this alone. But the other legions took such heavy casualties during the heresy and the subsequent Scouring, fighting other Astartes, that very few actually returned. The legions were all but shattered. The second founding, where the legions were broken into chapters of 1,000 men only, was performed by the Primarchs, never forgetting how difficult this was to agree in the end. Only Reboot's phenomenal diplomacy managed to make his brother Primarchs weary from war and attached to those who had survived the trial. Eventually, even they saw the necessity of the new organization, even Dawn. But because of this, the second founding chapters were mostly of Ultramarine stock, as they were more numerous, and thus has it remained ever since. So Ultramarines should not be proud that they are the most numerous. They should mourn the bravery and losses of their wider brothers. And the Ultramarines know that it is their continued responsibility to uphold and defend the Imperium. They never gave up that chalice. They do not do it for the other legions, they do it with them. But they know that the weight falls hardest on their shoulders, as theirs are now the widest, and must take the load. It is also due to the combat doctrines of the Codex Astartes and its perfect fit with the instincts of the Ultramarines that allowed them to execute it so perfectly, so easily. It plays their strengths, and it mitigates losses that more impassioned chapters may employ. Nobody doubts the results are often dynamic and swifter, but they can lead to more casualties. From a certain point of view, the effect on the psyche of Reboot and his sons became that of protection and almost more realism, certainly more long-term in its scope. The need to conserve forces and deploy them across a large theatre to accept situations of weighing risks of worlds against the weakening of the entire region. A more defensive, more long-term strategic view became ingrained in them after they all came out of the shock of the heresy. The Ultramarines shifted, or became more extreme. Meanwhile, the other legions were still engaged in a shocking war of rage that could effectively not be done without accepting high risk-to-reward situations to remove the traitor Marines, or even scorching losses. But they fought other legions, other Astartes. Hence, after the shock of the heresy, they continued into the Scouring, and high losses became almost a thing of acceptance, or at least they were more dulled to them. As such, the other legions and the chapters they were broken into, been ever about the ending of a threat, and far more accepting of losses. The Ultramarines try their hardest at all times to defend others. It was why Reboot came to save Rogul Dawn and his Imperial Fists at the Iron Cage incident, despite the way Dawn could take a front. Reboot could simply not witness the waste of his nephews, the death of his brother. Not for this. Yet my own pet view is that in many ways Reboot and the Ultramarines are subconsciously attempting to shoulder the losses, yet never shield their brothers, for this would be an insult, a difficult tightrope to walk. The entire culture of the 500 worlds of Ultramar is now returning to being the perfect engine of war again, but perhaps closer to the dream of the Imperium. For it is a society built to be robust and yet adaptable, and staggeringly productive. It has become wealthy, and hence has it become proud indeed in the eyes of many throughout the time of the Imperium, but perhaps unjustly. The jealous call it the Empire within the Imperium. But I say, forgive them, O Emperor and Regent, for they know not what they do. For the heart of the Imperium may reside on Terra, but the burden of it falls hardest on Ultramar. Just as the weight of rule sits plainly on the shoulders of their lord, Reboot Gilliman, who must feel so out of time and so alone. His brothers, the fellow Primarchs, are still all missing. Poor Reboot. But as stated, beyond any other region, Ultramar generates so many more men, supplies, fleets, armies, and even new chapters of Space Marines via gene seed ties, as well as maintaining the Ultramarines themselves. Without Ultramar and her sons, the Ultramarines and all of their myriad successors, and without the Regent, Reboot, very swiftly, there would be no Imperium. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed my little take on a very published subject, as strange as that may have been. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you are a regular gentle listener and see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider supporting us on Patreon. Link in the comments. Oh, yes, honey? I said what? Ventru? Must have been a fortnight. Oh, it was. That explains it then. Rambling on. I know, it's odd that they became the Ventru while I was away on my gap. Wonder if Tam Draw played it. Would explain a lot. Nah, he wouldn't do that. Silly thought. Oh, mic's on again. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo. Gaius Sempronius sat in the apothecary, his arm being measured for a cybernetic. The apothecary muttered to himself while performing the checks and measures. A huge warrior, even for an Astartes, the grizzled lord of the chapter, walked into the medbay and nodded to him. "Misplaced something?" he said with a hint of a wry smile dancing at the edge of his lips. Gaius looked up and smiled. "Very good, sir. I'd clap at the Jaybird." The Goliath nodded with amusement, but the smile never emerged, as his face went suddenly serious. "As soon as you are up and running, I have a task for you, Captain. A dire deed that requires your attention. Tigurius has seen something. A battle, a war the likes has not been seen for an age. The Imperium will find their enemies swarm like flies and be as varied as the grains of sand on a beach," he said. "We cannot let this battle ensue without the sons of Gulliman being represented." Gaius nodded his assent. "You will represent every Marine with the seed of the Regent within them. You will take your company, for it is all we can initially spare. You will be going on a long journey. Train your men. Drill them remorselessly on your sojourn, brother. For you head to this critical world, this place of destiny. Abundance Tertius."